So I wanted to talk about how we can cultivate a daily writing practice, and one that builds our creative work into something that we feel joy from, we feel connected to, that we feel we're being infused with a kind of a power or an energy that is even beyond our abilities at times, and one that feels abundant to us. Personally, I'm a writer, a poet, a photographer. I've spent pretty much my whole life making things, but I wasn't always doing so effortlessly and easily. In fact, for the majority of my life, I would say that as an artist, I was quite frustrated. I wrote, I played music, I did various things, but always with this kind of sense that I was waiting to be inspired, and that I never was moving forward. It never felt like it was complete to me. And then one day, about 10 or 12 years ago, a friend of mine challenged me to write daily. I think what had happened was I called him to ask if he would have breakfast with me. And during that breakfast, I was complaining about, I think, my lack of creativity. And he said to me that, I hear you talk about writing, but are you writing? And I had said, no, I wasn't writing regularly. I wrote maybe when I was inspired to. I wrote maybe a poem, a couple of poems a month, or a couple of stories a month or a year. And he challenged me then. He said, why don't you see what would happen if you wrote every day? And set a goal for yourself to write. You pick the time. It could be 15 minutes. 15 minutes writing a day is better than not writing at all. And so I did. I committed. I took that challenge and I committed myself to writing daily. And I would say within a few years, even within a few months of starting it, I noticed things starting to change in my life creatively. But then within a few years, I published 2 collections of poetry. I found that I had a wide community and a growing community and family of writers around me. I had built an entire life that now seemed like it was around writing. I founded a literary arts center, and I was now teaching workshops in Italy and Mexico and being invited to teach throughout the United States. And I think all of this really happened because I devoted myself to practicing writing daily. Every day I brought my attention and my intention to the act of being creative. And I can't stress enough that when we are consistent in our creative work, that there is, I think, and this might be a bold statement for some people to hear, and for others you may have already realized this, but when we begin to act, there is an energy in the world that assists us creatively. It is, I think, the energy of life itself. You look outside, the plants are growing, things are always kind of flowing and becoming and blooming and prospering. I feel like there's this unfailing energy which is there. It's abundance, it's love. It's all around us and it is within us because we are that life. And so when we begin to kind of cultivate this, we come into relationship with this through being daily with it and being consistent with it. The gifts come through us and they start to materialize and become real all around us. So I would say that this energy then is it's a relationship that we need to figure out how it works for us. And so what I'd like to do in this workshop, really, what I'd like to talk about with all of you, and at the end, I'm going to leave some time for questions because I know people will have questions or may have questions. But what I wanted to do is just talk about some practical steps that you can take in your own life to kind of figure out developing your own practice, kind of establishing these rituals for yourself. And then kind of how to propel yourself forward and to keep writing. And I will say also, since I'm thinking of it, I'm gonna cover a lot in this short time, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. But I will be in the fall through 1455 doing a 12-week workshop where each week we'll take slower steps. And if you're interested in developing your own writing practice, we will take it week by week and kind of help to build something that is consistent, and so that you're writing every day and writing abundantly. So first thing I want to talk about in the practical side is that commit to yourself that we are writers. We love to work with language. If you know that about yourself, like I have always known that about myself, but I just wasn't doing it. And I think that's where my frustration was coming from. So if you know this about yourself, that you need to write, and it is important to you, then, kind of make an agreement with yourself that you're going to write every day. And you don't have to write for 2 hours a day. You don't have to write for the entire day. You could just write for 15 minutes, 10 minutes. When I sit down to write in the mornings now, I have a full-time job that I leave for at 8 o'clock in the morning. I get up in the morning and I just write for 10, 15 minutes, half an hour. It's amazing how much writing I can get done. Sometimes it's, 2, 3, 4 pages, depending on how freely I'm writing. And then I look back in the course of, a couple of weeks, and I filled the notebook with work. So determine for yourself that you're going to commit to a writing practice, and then think about how you structure your life. So if you're working a full-time job, or you have family, all of us have responsibilities. Think really clearly about in your life where this time is that you can build into it for writing. For me, it's the morning, because as the day goes on, things kind of, take on their own form, and sometimes they get out of my control. I get tired from work. I have other responsibilities at the end of the day. And I've found that for me, it's difficult to get to the writing later in the day. And so the morning is the time that I've assigned for myself to write. So figure out in your day when that time might be. And maybe, and hopefully it aligns with your most creative time of the day. I'm mostly creative in the morning. The evenings, again, I'm just too tired. My brain's kind of filled with all the things that have gone on, or the things that I need to attend to. And I don't have that large, open, empty kind of space within me that I feel like I need in order to write. So when is your most creative time of the day? And can you align that with this time that you're setting aside to write? The third thing is, where is a space that you can write? Again, these are just the practical things, but where is there a space in your home, or a library, or a cafe, a coffee house? Is there a space that you can find that you can go and write? And really defend this space. If it's a room in your house, if it's a space in the library, I say defend it. I mean, just, make this space kind of yours, and a sacred space where you feel comfortable to free yourself up to do the writing that you need to do. And that involves going deep within yourself, being quiet, being engaged with your interior and your exterior, because we're often witnessing things while we're writing, we're processing. But it needs to be a space where we feel like we can really sink in, not be distracted. And I'd say the same thing about defending your time. When I first started to write, one of the things that I immediately came up against was friends and family kind of challenging that time. I would say, they would say, hey, do you want to go get a coffee? And I'd say, oh, I'm writing. And they'd say, oh, you can do that later. And I always found that funny, because if I told people that I was going to work, say at a job like a bank, or as a lawyer, or whatever it would be, they would accept that. They wouldn't challenge that, oh, you have to go to work, so I won't interrupt you. But when I said I was writing, which to me is very important and is work, they would often I felt like they would challenge that. And so I quickly found that I had to defend that time that I was writing. So no, from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. or whatever time I was writing, because it's varied throughout my life. I constantly tweak it around my schedule so that it has a prominent place in my daily life, as a practice, a real practice. So defend that time, defend that space that you're going to allot to your creative time. And then kind of moving a little deeper, once you have these things for yourself, you set aside this time, you set aside this space, you're kind of committing yourself to write every day for a certain amount of time, create a ritual around it. The first thing I need to do is make a cup of coffee. And then I usually read a few poems, collections that I keep by my desk. And that kind of takes me naturally into my own writing, kind of opens things up for me. But whatever this is for you, whatever rituals you need to get yourself to the page, these are important. It's important to kind of begin to cultivate this mindset that we're entering into. So even when I'm making my cup of coffee, I can already feel myself, because I've done this so many days, and I can already feel my mind and my body starting to kind of transition into that space, that writing space. And then certainly when I sit down and I open up the books of poems and I start to read, again, I'm starting to feel now this whole conditioned response in my mind and my body, that I'm getting ready to write. I'm preparing myself to write. So these rituals, they're really important. For you, they could be whatever it is, but the importance of rituals, as we have them in they exist everywhere in our lives. So weddings, funerals, graduations, the big events, notice that they're always filled with rituals. There's some sort of song, or there are prayers, or there's, something to bring our minds to the proper awareness and behavior, if you will, for the moment. And the rituals that we practice in order to get us to our writing, it's the same sort of thing. These rituals are preparing us to have the right mindset, the right posture, if you will, of the body to kind of go in and do the work that we're about to do. Meditation, people try meditation, people go for walks. You're going to develop your own rituals as you kind of work out your own practice. You will just come up with your own naturally, and they may change. You don't have to be rigid with them. If something's not working for you, switch it up. I said, now I'm writing in the mornings. I have this process, getting my coffee, reading some poems, I have my journal out or my computer, and I start to work. But in the past, it has been going for walks with my dogs. I have some beautiful woods behind my house, and I would often walk through those woods, 15, 20-minute walk, and I would feel the music kind of start to generate naturally as I was walking the dogs. And then I would come home and sit down and start my process. So a practice is really about figuring out what works for us and how we're going to make it work and keep ourselves moving forward in our creative work. Repeat these routines. Just make them this ritual that you do. Try to allow them to guide you, because your body has memory and your mind has, of course, memories. But you also remember that feeling the reward, that kind of feeling you get after you have done this. You know that what it's leading you to is the process of writing. This kind of opening, this relationship with this energy, this creative energy. That is here in the universe and that is assisting in our work. One really important thing too about, I think, a writing process, at least for me, is and has been, when I am making new work, I'm not criticizing, I'm not editing, I am just there to make, to create, to bring from the kind of the silence of the empty page something new into the world. And so I set aside different time for editing and for crafting work that has already been written. But what I'm talking about here is just setting aside time to sit down and make new things, be engaged in the creative process. So tapping into, allowing ourselves to tap into this rich vein of imagery and stories and poetry and music that is within us on a daily basis, and just training ourselves to be open and open and open, so that whatever it is that needs to come through, whatever stories or poems or songs or whatever it is we're working and envisioning and trying to make material, is free to kind of come through us. And we are then just kind of opening a conduit, a channel, to bring forth whatever we need to say. So don't be critical of yourselves when you're writing in your establishing your practice and writing daily. Just allow that time to be your creative time, your creative journey, and see where this leads you and what it wants to be and what it might suggest. Allow yourself to be surprised. I think about writers, and there's something about sitting down and writing that I feel like we treat it as really precious, or something that has to be, that's etched in stone, like we're creating a monument each time we sit down to write. And I find this quite odd, because it removes this sense of kind of play and this idea of practice, which let me equate it to like musicians or athletes. You don't hear musicians say, I'm going, what you do hear musicians and athletes say is, I'm going to practice the piano, or I'm going to baseball practice, or I'm going to play the guitar. Whereas writing, it seems like, I think we could really benefit from that kind of idea, that when we sit down to write, where in the past, I felt like, oh, I have to sit down and write this kind of masterpiece. What has changed in me now is I sit down to write and I think, I'm going to practice writing. I'm going to practice writing a poem, or I'm going to play at writing a story. And I might not say that necessarily consciously anymore, but the idea is there, that it's not this, I'm not doing something precious, and I'm not doing something predetermined. And what I am doing is playing with language, and I'm making something that has never before been in the world. And so there has to be this kind of freedom, I feel, that we allow ourselves to kind of journey, to be surprised, to stumble upon new things that we didn't even know we were thinking about. And just don't judge those things. Let them come through, whatever they are, even if we feel like they're non sequiturs, even if we feel like this isn't what I meant to write today, this isn't what I was thinking about, this isn't where I started. You may surprise yourself, and that is just part of the process. So don't judge, don't criticize, just allow yourself to write. The only force I feel like that can prevent us from moving toward our expression, our real creative expression, is our own complacency. And I certainly was complacent about my own work for many years, longer than I'd like to admit, because I hate to think about all the things I did not write because I was being complacent. And so acting daily, writing daily, and establishing this practice that we have is the opposite of being complacent. We are taking action. We are acting. We're bringing to bear our own energy upon a work. And we are, in doing so, we're kind of joining into this creative energy that as I mentioned, there's this power that's all around us, this energy that is of life, which is always becoming, always making new. There is, by the way, the opposite of life isn't death. The opposite of death is birth. Life encompasses everything. And that's why I talk about this just abundance. There's no end to it. It's just always becoming, always generating. And this is what we're tapping into, unless we are complacent, unless we are pushing it away. And I know from the many writers that I've talked to, and I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands, through the different, teaching and the Literary Arts Center that I founded and ran. The one thing that holds people back is that they just don't do it. They don't act on their work. They don't act on their ideas. And so that is, I know it seems so simple, but that just seems to be, once we start, once we act, once we start to engage with our work, with all of this world that is within us, then the universe, it assists us. It is there to, it is moved to come to our aid. It's funny, I love to study, I always have, I've loved to read about other artists' process. How do they write? How do they work? And I have found two things in almost every writer that I have read about all the artists, the sculptors, even scientists, anyone engaged in making things. The two things are, one, they have a daily practice. They work at their craft. They work at their, whatever it is they're doing. It could be in pursuit of a vaccination, whatever it is. They go to work every day. They treat what they're doing as a job. And the second thing is that even if it's reluctantly that they come to admit it or surrender to it or acknowledge it, that they all acknowledge something greater than themselves at work in their creativity. And I know that may be challenging for some people. I'm not saying that there's a God or there isn't a God. I'm not making an argument for anything. I'm just saying that when we get to work, what I have seen from others and I've experienced in myself is when we are at work, there is something that aids us. There is some mystery that that helps in the making. And so maybe we just need to be open to that sort of opening. So I feel like a practice, one of the benefits of a daily practice is it begins to awaken what is already wise and strong and deep and true within us. We discover kind of our own intuition. We discover the images and the stories, the music that is within us. It may be latent, but it is, and it's vibrating. And when we return to the page day after day, these things begin to vibrate with us all the time. It's not like when I was writing inconsistently, it was so hard to kind of get into a flow. I was just, it was always like I was beginning again, or that I was, just kind of stuck and held back. But through consistency in writing, it's like these things are always vibrating within and around, and I never really leave it. Even though I set down the page after, say, 30 minutes of writing, and I go to work, but I haven't left that work. It's because it's activated and it's always playing within me, and I'm always going back and kind of stirring it up, or I'm mixing metaphors here, but I'm always because I'm attending to it, I keep these things vibrating. And so these stories, they just start to resonate, and these images, they keep resonating. And it's really what I kind of survive on. I love what the poet Gregory Orr says, that, what we're doing in writing is finding the poems, the songs, and the stories that make us brave enough to live in this world. And I guess that's one of the things that I have found among the many gifts I've found through being consistent in my work, is the images, the stories, the music, the poems, like these are real, this is community. Um, it's community to me, and it has helped me navigate life. And, you know, those things are always there. I'm always going to touch them. I'm always, I'm always with them, and they're always with me. And this is that abundance that I was talking about earlier. When we're consistent, this abundance that is with us, that is always ready to assist us. And when we become kind of more open to it, and we are working, it's readily accessible. It's just kind of, it's not like we have to turn it on or rev it up. It's just, it's there through our practice. It's there because we've practiced. It's like, again, going back to the musical, or the musician or the athlete. You know, they don't have to think about the musical scales. When a good pianist is, you know, practiced so much, you know, their fingers just run over those keys. You know, say a baseball player, you know, hitting a ball. That motion has just become something they do without thought. It becomes so fluid to them. And our writing, you know, is the same. Our creativity, not just writing, but our creative energy, the way we create, the way we are as makers, becomes much more fluid when we are engaged in it daily. I'm getting some questions, which I will answer verbally if I can, and if not, I can probably type the answer in offline. But I do see that I'm getting some questions here, which I'll leave time for. So one thing I like to think about, I always am interested in kind of images that I can take to the page. And I've talked about, you know, picking your times of day to write, and a space to write, and kind of carving out this, an amount of time. One thing I always go back to in my own thinking about my own processes. When I was traveling many years ago in Thailand, every morning, right, you know, early, probably no later than 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning, you know, from the monastery, these young monks would come out, and they had gold colored bowls that they would carry in front of them, kind of extended in front of them. And they would walk through the streets or through the markets, and with these empty bowls, they're empty bowls, and people would approach them, bow to them, they would bow back, kind of a gesture, you know, honoring one another. And the people would place food into these bowls, and that was their food for the day. And I think the reason this has stayed with me, this idea, these kind of begging bowls, and it's a very different, I think, begging. What we think about in the West is begging. This is not the same idea in the East. In fact, it's a way to kind of, it's a transaction between the person who is receiving and the person who is giving. It's a whole transaction that is, that has to do with spiritual merits and karma and on and on. But anyway, back to the idea of us as writers, or myself as a writer, kind of carrying this begging bowl, or this small empty bowl, this vessel, which I'm holding out in front of me, which could be the empty page, in which I'm walking into the world, and I'm asking the universe, or I'm asking for whatever wants to come today into this bowl, that I'm willing to receive it. And that's the kind of gesture I try to arrive at my page with each day, that I'm going to walk in with this openness and this emptiness, and I'm expecting it to be filled, but I'm not in a way, but being grateful for whatever it is. So it might be carrots, it might be lettuce, it might be onions, it might be rice, but whatever it is, there's this gratitude for what is coming. And there's this wonderful faith that I know that it will be filled. Another thing about this, which I thought was interesting, is these bowls weren't huge. You know, it wasn't like this giant shopping basket that was taken about in the streets to be filled with with food. It was a small bowl. And thinking about my own writing, it's not like I need much to be fulfilled in my writing when I have this small kind of bowl of whatever comes, even if it's one sentence or one word, that is enough to overflow this bowl. But what I have to do, and the only thing really I can do, or we can do as writers and be in control of, is to show up, is to come with this open, with this empty bowl of our work, and say, I'm here on the page and I'm receiving whatever it is that is going to come into this. And through that practice, I think there is a fulfillment, because of what we learn, or what I have learned, and I think what these monks in Thailand are, what is demonstrated to them every day, is this kind of faith to take through the streets, this empty bowl, and it's going to be filled. The faith that we are going to be provided for. And when we practice daily and we see day after day that the pages, that something is coming, that faith is being established, that there's always something. There's always something coming, because we are creative beings, because we are life itself, that something is always there. If we get out of our way, we allow ourselves to write whatever it is that needs to be. This doesn't mean, I feel like I get this question a lot too, or does that mean I can't be working on a project, or a book, or whatever it is? It certainly does not mean that. We do have projects. I mentioned that I have work that has already been written that I'm crafting and shaping, and I do that at a different part of my day. But I am very interested in just kind of keeping that channel open and keeping the flow going. And I do that by just having this process of writing where I do not critique myself. I'm not editing myself. I'm just investigating and receiving and surrendering to kind of what is coming. But what that does is we accumulate a ton of material to work with. So my last book, which came out in 2018, I wrote for 2.5 years without ever worrying or editing, looking back at what I was writing. I wasn't interested. I just wanted to accumulate material for a certain amount of time until I, felt, I don't even know why I determined when I was done, and I would go and start to kind of turn this into something. It was just important for me at that time to be in the process of creating and making every day as much as I could. And I turned out, 1,000 pages, 1,000 poems nearly. I think it was 980 some poems. Of course, only 62 made it into the book, but all that material, all of it informed everything else. It informed the entire process. It informed the whole book. So we kind of come out with this bowl to be filled. And in doing so, what we put on the page then is also important. Not important what it is, important that we do it, because this is our offering. It is this kind of reciprocating gift. When we're creative, when we are engaged in creativity, if we shut that off, we're kind of shutting off this gift that we have, that we've been given, that we've been drawn to. We want to write. We know we want to write. We want to be musicians, or we want to be artists. We want to be writers. But when we don't do anything towards that, we cut off this vital energy, and it begins to stunt us. And by letting that kind of gift come through and come to the page, or however it is you write, but when we allow that to come and be something, then that is a giving of it, and that completes this transaction that happens within creativity. There's a wonderful book called The Gift by Lewis Hyde, if you don't know it, you should go find it. It's a brilliant book. It was written in the 70s. Lewis Hyde, Hyde, first name Lewis. Lewis Hyde's The Gift. And it talks a lot about the reciprocity of the gift, and how, and it follows gift cultures, gift giving throughout human history. But later in the book, it really is specifically addressing artists and this kind of completion of the gift that we are given as artists, and that our job is to keep this gift in circulation. And so when we sit to write, when we tap into this energy, when we make, when we engage in the making, we are then completing this gift by writing it, by getting it on the page, and then, sharing it. It doesn't mean it has to be published, but just that we're keeping this energy in circulation, and that's the important. It's important because I think we just are keeping it in motion, but the thing that we're demonstrating to ourselves is that even when we feel like we've emptied of that day, that the next day when we come back, there's more. It's there again. There's something more to write. There's something more. There's another image to unpack. There's some deeper listening that we need, that we are charged with. And so we begin to experience too that no matter how much we express, there's more filling up that well within us. And this is the abundance. We kind of keep emptying, keep filling, keep emptying, keep filling. And then again, that faith in, like the monks going out and just knowing that believing and having faith that they're going to receive their sustenance for that day. As writers, as artists, as makers, we begin to have that faith through our daily practice that when we sit to write, we've emptied one day, but when we sit down the next day, we're going to be filled again. There's still more to come. There's always more to come. And we just now are in this cycle of making, emptying, giving, receiving, giving and receiving. There's a wonderful definition of devotion, because I think of this as a devoted practice, devoted to creating. But there's a wonderful definition of devotion, which is devotion is a coming to love. And I think of love as a capital L, not just a coming to kind of love something, but a coming to love something, loving us, something that loves us. And all I can say about that is, in my own experience of but that thing that loves us is life, is that we are, again, we're engaged in this, we are engaged in this eternal blooming, becoming, this abundance that is all we've tapped into. And I don't know how, it's our inheritance. And so we're just then enacting that relationship, which is always ours, if we're willing to kind of be in it daily. So I guess that really kind of covers it. Our faith that we just be kind of, we become this kind of creative, I don't know, energy. We enter into this kind of solid and unbroken channel of communing with abundance. And, for me personally, I finally became, in my life, I mean, at times it's fits and starts, but for the most part, I am engaged in making the way I have always wanted to be engaged in making since I, can remember, since I was a child. So I think that's all. I don't know if I can hear people. I hope that I can. I guess if you unmute yourselves, I'll be able to hear any questions. I do see some on the side and I can answer those.
Hey, Justin, it's Karen.
Hi, Karen.
Back in. Everyone is muted, but they can ask all their questions via that Q&A box. So
Okay.
we have about 8 questions. I know you've been talking. You might not have had a chance to,
I haven't answered them
or
yet.
yes, or even read them. There are a few that sort of cover this idea of setting aside time. And also avoiding some distractions. How do you avoid distractions? And then also, what you do when you find yourself with, a creativity ebbing.
Okay,
So
great.
those are a handful that have been posed thus far.
Great. I'm going to go through them then. I can see them, so I will answer them and I'll just answer them right here. And Karen, maybe you can help me with the first one.
Of
The
course.
fall workshop, how will that person register for that workshop? Do you know that will be posted later on 1455's website?
Yes, it is. Yep. We'll be posting all that information on the website. Oh, Sean's here. Great.
Hey, man.
Yeah, so I'm delighted to say that we're actively in the process of updating the website, and we're putting the back end together. But shortly after the Lit Fest, we'll be going live and promoting that, and we'll make it a very seamless process for people to understand and register.
Great. So look for that. I'll be putting it on my social media too when we're ready to do that. And I'm so excited for that, Sean. Sue has a couple of questions. One being the random ideas, or do I write a continuation of a piece or a chapter? It's mostly random ideas. I shouldn't say random because they are whatever. But I'm not necessarily working on anything specific at any one time. Although during this pandemic, I have been kind of working on one thing. So again, when we find ourselves in this continuous practice, we may find ourselves working on a theme. When I was talking about writing for 2.5 years before I started to kind of cull everything and create a book around what I had written over that time. But the whole time, the theme was exile, refugees. I knew that because that's what was happening in the world and I was tapped into that, I knew that I was working around that idea, but I wasn't really conscious of shaping a chapter or shaping anything specific for that. The other question that Sue asked is how do you avoid the distractions? I don't. That's a struggle. So, but the thing I feel that helps me avoid the distractions, or at least overcome some of the distractions, is the consistency, especially a consistent time of day that I'm working. So right now it's in the morning. I'm writing at like 6 to 7 in the morning. And so there are a few distractions, and I've picked that time because I have to go to work at 8 o'clock, and I usually work, I'm working until 5 o'clock, and then I'm tired after that. So at other times in my life, it's been different times. So, yeah, there's no avoiding the distraction. You just try to build something in that helps you overcome them, that gets through them. A minimum word count. Mara asks about a minimum word count. I don't know. If the poet Joseph Stroud says, all I could manage today was a little cluck of a song. Mm-hmm. And for that, I'm grateful. And that's what I mean about this little begging bowl. I mean, it hardly matters, really. If you sit down and you bring your attention and intention, and you get one sentence and you get one word, that word could mean more than writing, 500 words. I don't think word count is necessary. And I certainly don't feel like it's necessary if it's going to stress you out. The important thing is to be able to write. What I find with a lot of writers who are trying to be consistent, is that as soon as they don't reach a goal that they've set, and it might be a goal that is just, I'm going to write for an hour every day. And as soon as they don't write for an hour every day, they think, oh God, I can't do this. I'm not a writer. Maybe that's not your issue, but I think those arbitrary things are they may, unless they are helpful for you, then I don't think they're necessary to put in place. I yeah, I just think it's the important thing is to write. How do I manage during these times of, okay, creative ebbs? Well, we're just going to be certainly sparking more at other times than in others, and I just write through them, and I write a lot of crap. So I said I wrote 987, I think, poems for the book that, which became a book of 62 poems. There was a lot, most of that was crappy in hindsight, but I wrote it, and I sat and wrote, and I had to write a lot of that in order to write the things that were good too, in order to find my way in. And again, it's practice. It's not about sitting down and writing, necessarily writing a masterpiece every time. It's impossible. But to sit down and to just engage in the creative process is vital. And so setting a time, that's that answer, setting aside time for writing, but reading and writing go hand in hand. How many hours do you dedicate? I read until, right now, I read until I get that kind of spark, like, oh, that's a sentence. I need to, I suddenly have an idea on what to write. So right now I'm reading as kind of almost like a way to prime myself to get to my writing. So I don't have a set time. I could read one poem and I'm instantly sparked, or I might have to read, 5 or 6, or, a couple things in a news feed, or who knows what. But I know that what my practice is right now, and I talked about routine earlier, that my ritual and my routine are getting me ready to write. And so I know at this point that reading a few poems, reading for a short time, all of this is going into me writing something. And so I don't really have a set time, because that's not what I'm feeling for. I'm feeling for when I have that moment of, okay, now I got to pick up the pen. I have something I want to say. I want to explore. So do you set aside separate time for just free flow creative writing and another block of time for working on specific projects? I do. And mostly because I've noticed in my own creative ebb and flow that I can edit with another side of my brain. Editing is creative, but it's different. I can do editing at midnight. I can't write anything new at midnight. It doesn't happen. I can't write anything new after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I do all of my creative, my new work, all of the making in the morning when I'm most creative. What is my other job? Every job I've had is so big to allow me the time to write and make art. I know it. I have a business. I have a landscaping business. I have 2 teenagers. I'm married. I have 2 really busy dogs. And a big landscaping business. So that has always been difficult, but it's become impossible for me to live without writing. I need to write. And so I write before I go to work. I get up extra early. That's not always been possible for me but the older I've gotten, I get up earlier just naturally. But what I was doing then is just writing when I could not write in the morning and I still was going to work all day. I wrote at my lunch break. I had 30 minutes at lunch or 1 hour at lunch. And I I took myself to some place quiet where I had my journal or my computer, and I wrote during that time. And again, it's amazing how much material you can generate in 10 or 15 minutes of writing a day. If that's all you have, then do it for that amount of time, because that's, 15 minutes a day is, an hour and 45 minutes a week. That's, you're getting some material, and you extend that over a year, you have a book. So, yeah, I know, right? I know it's hard for us to work and to write, but if writing, we know we have to write for our lives in order to have a quality life. And that's really what I'm talking about too, all of this. It's about, I'm having the life that I've wanted to have because I'm being creative, where for a lot of my life when I wasn't being creative, I was frustrated. And I was always thinking about writing and being creative. So we just have to carve out that time. What sorts of non-writing activities inspire you? Traveling. playing music, taking photographs. So yeah. Okay, Pamela. Thank you. Do I have a similar experience working on do you find a similar experience when specifically working on a project? I always encourage them to just play with. So there always has got to be an element with our play, with our creation. Even when we're working on a project, I don't feel like I ever know what I'm working towards. I have to be playing and exploring along the way. That's just for me, that's just the nature of being creative. You know, something new gets thrown into the mix. What am I going to do with this? You know, you get a certain, I had this great teacher when I was in elementary school and middle school. She would give us creative projects all the time, like creative problem solving things. She was wonderful. But so say she would give us like 3 items. Okay, now you have to build with these 3 items, you have to build something. And then halfway through the process, she would throw in a wrench, you know, a 4th element that we had to incorporate. And I feel like that's the way creativity is too. Even when we're working on a project, a new element could arrive at any time. And how are we going to bring this in? That's the play. That's kind of the flexibility that we need to have. Could I please share my social media handles? Thank you, Rana. Yes, it's Justen Ahren on Facebook. So just my name, JUSTEN AHREN. And on Instagram, hashtag Justen Ahren, I guess. I don't even know. So I think that's it. You know, I don't think anyone else has that same spelling of my name. So if you just type that in the search, you'll find it. Okay, I'm trying to get through all these. We're running low on time. How do I manage leaving my practice time when things are really flowing and going on? Well, do I feel anxiety from breaking that flow? I don't necessarily feel anxiety. I feel exhilarated. So boy, when I get into that flow, I just carry my journal with me. Or, you know, we all have these wonderful phones we can record things into. So I might just, you know, speak things into my phone and record it so I have it later. Have you practiced Zen? If so, does writing feel like a Zen practice? I don't know, but writing certainly feels like, I haven't practiced Zen. Writing certainly feels like a spiritual practice to me, that it connects me with something deeper and that grounds me and expands me. So in that regard, the practice is, I guess, like any other practice that you really, you know, grow into, you grow through doing it. How do I organize my writing? The one sentence from a daily writing or a fragment of something. I struggle with this. So when I'm just doing my writing, I use all kinds of things to inspire me. Like I said, right now, I just happen to be reading through poetry and I look for things to, I just wait, I kind of read enough and then I get something that inspires me. I hear music through these poems that inspire me and I want to write on. Sometimes I write from photographs. You know, if you, Amy, if you're interested in developing the practice, when I do this workshop over 12 weeks through 1455 this fall, I will load people up with daily prompts, exercises to carry them through different things that have worked for me to keep me writing and ways I find inspiration. So if you're interested, you can always take that workshop, look into that workshop. And one thing about our practice as we develop it, we're always finding, we always have to be on the lookout for ways that we keep ourselves going and moving forward. Borrow lines from other people's work to get you writing, whatever it takes to seed your own work. I think on my website, I know I'm most comfortable with what I don't yet know how to say or depict. How do I become comfortable with not knowing, Ruth? Well, I never know what I'm going to make. So that's just part of being creative. I don't even know what's going to happen the next day. I mean, the next minute. So I think that's part of the surprise of writing and the way that it also kind of informs how we live. I don't know. I just want to be open to whatever it is that's coming. And so I don't know if I'm always comfortable with it. I just know as a lover of language and words that when I see something I don't understand, the first thing I'm thinking about doing is how am I going to write about it? I mean, what language do I have for this new experience? What language do I have for what I'm falling in love with? And I'm groping around, but eventually it comes. Okay. Terry, thank you. That's a really wonderful comment. Karen, thank you so much. Thank you. Sue, thank you. And thank you. I guess I answered them all.
I think you did. Thanks, Justin. Really appreciate your time. On behalf of all of our participants, we had about 50 people in this session, which is phenomenal. I'm so glad that everyone could join us. So I really appreciate your time and all the insight that you offered. And you're very adept at walking and chewing gum in terms of being able to give a great presentation, also manage all of our questions and everything. So thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks 1455 and to everyone who participated. I appreciate it.
Super.
Take care.
So for everyone else, we'll be reconvening at noon. We'll be talking with Jane Friedman about the publishing industry in 2020, what writers need to know. So an early lunch break for all, and we hope to see you back at noon. Thanks again.